Hello and welcome to the second part of our Identity Manager Angular web development video series. In this second part, we will show you how you can use Angular just to build a very small application. This is for all the people who are not Angular web developers and are interested how Angular web development works. Additionally, we will show you in the second part as well how to connect a REST service, which is the second part of part 2. However, after part 2 of the video series, we will step into part 3, where we talk about the standard web portal where a lot of people are looking for. And now please just follow me to the screen and follow me implementing my first web application with Angular. And now we start to develop some Angular code or TypeScript code. We will see that in a second. Just to recap what we did in the videos before, we installed our environments, and of course I created here for my video development a specific empty folder which is under Git protection. You can see that here. I installed all the prerequisites. One of the prerequisites, the important one, is code. I installed Visual Studio Code as well. And to recap a little bit our installed add-ons, I like to show you here my new add-on set. I outlined it in the video before. As you can see, the Angular Essentials version 13 was one of the things I installed. I just selected the Angular Essentials because the Angular Essentials from John Papa, I like to say the grandfather of important stuff around Angular, are just a collection, as you easily can see, of different add-ons, could be helpful. And together with that, I installed two other ones. One is called the NX Console. The NX Console right here is just to show a graphical interface for the one or the other Angular command. And the last thing I installed is the Git Lens. And as you easily can see, the full name of that thing is Git Lens Git Supercharged. And that one here helps me then dealing with Git. So to be able to do that, the NX Console, it's right here. It will only be visible once you have an Angular project in place. All around Git is here underneath of source control. You see the Git Lens adds a lot of stuff here, what you can use. And stepping back to my project, you see that this specific Angular project, it's completely empty. So my first step here is just to ensure that a new Git project exists. Therefore, I open the terminal. And the good thing on the terminal is that I can create as many of these terminals as I like to. So that is the standard terminal. Additionally to the standard terminal, I add a Git bash. That is helpful because then I can easily look into my very specific Git. As you easily can see, this is the command line version of Git, but there's nothing in there because nothing is in my directory. So back to the PowerShell. The first step is just to ensure that everything is installed correctly from a version perspective. So I check my Nodes Package Manager. As you can see, installed in version 8.11, that's nice. And I check as well my Angular. And therefore, I need the version command. And as you easily can see, even Angular says I am pretty well installed in version 14. That is an LTS with the Node Package Manager and so on. That is all great. That means I'm fully prepared directly to start with Angular development. So I can use the NX Console, but I can as well use here the Angular command. I will use the client command line here. And I like to create a new project. We did that in the video before. This is just a recap. And I like to name it Identity Management. So, and with having it correctly typed, I can directly enter the command. And now my Angular will start to install. Two questions to answer first. And these are questions, these are important. First question is, what about the Angular routing? Do I like to implement an Angular routing or not? What exactly is an Angular routing? An Angular routing means that you have more components and modules which are acting with each other. you have a menu somewhere, and you can then switch from one menu entry to another menu entry. And to make all of that available, it is necessary to implement something that is called Angular routing. For our first exercise, because we want to learn the first baby steps, this is not important, and so I say no. What you have to know about this no here, it's a temporary no, because at any time I can insert my Angular routing more or less manually, but to deselect it right now here will decomplex a little bit the structure, which makes it easier to understand. The second question that happens, as you can easily see, is what type of, I like to say, styling sheets you want to use. And for all the people who are not the super big web experts, I like to say the standard cascading style sheet selected per defaults are good enough for a first step. And after that, my application starts to generate the project. You can see on the left-hand side a specific folder, and you can see here more and more of these files appearing. So once all of that is done, then you will easily see here in my git control 28 changes. If I step into that, you see here a couple of files just added to that specific project. In reality, of course, we added much more files. You can see that here, that new project just contains 250 megabytes for the empty projects. And important as well is that this is 250 megabytes splitted into, at the end, 40,000 files and 3,644 folders. The reason for that is that now Angular, TypeScript libraries, whatever else gets installed, only, as you can see it on the left-hand side, 28 of these files are relevant for our repository. The rest is just Angular and the Angular runtime, so that I can run and test my environment here. To do so, the next command, of course, we saw that as well. It's an Angular command as well. We just say serve, which is just spinning up like to say a small web browser, and that web browser is there to just display a specific web front. And to show that web front, I just add a switch called open, and with all of that. And what happens there is a standard arrow. You can see that standard arrow right here. Angular let you know that this is only possible in an Angular directory, which is absolutely right, because where we are, that is my Angular development root, but I'm not part of the Angular project. So first of all, I just step in my identity management subfolder. Here I am, and then automatically I can start that serve command. I have to answer here one time some questions. The first question is if I want to share my experiences with the internet. No, I don't. And then my Angular gets hopefully started. And here we are. You can see that this is the page of, I like to say, a complete empty command. First of all, you see there is a web server on localhost. That means on the machine I have installed my Angular. Honestly, I'm here in a training environment with the full Identity Manager installation. Nothing of that is necessary for the next steps. This part of the video story shows how to work with Angular. You can do that on a Mac, you can do that on a Linux box or on a Windows box, up to you. Because that local host, that means that small web server here, gets started once you enter the serve command. And on port 4200, you will then get that specific page. The page itself, it's sometimes very helpful as well. You have the entry point to some Angular learning material. There is the documentation of the command line. You see some Angular material and so on. All of that exists. And before we now start to change things, the first thing is that all of these changes with the new project just entered into the system gets now committed to Git. To do that, I step back here to my Visual Studio. I am in the source control. You see a lot of changes there. I just add all of the changes to the staged area. Here we are. And the last thing I have to do is to say this is my initial new web project. So And once that comment or that log message is written, I hold down the control key and I hit the enter key. And with that, I get informed that this is not really a good idea to do so. That is my second bug, because here some configuration is missing. And that is very typical as well for a Git. Git at least needs an email address and a name. And to enter that, I cancel here my commit. I step back into my console. You see that console is now running the project. So what I will do automatically, I switch to the bash. Here I'm directly in Git. Wonderful. And now I configure into the right directory my specific Git configuration. And to do so, I enter git config and I do it locally. And what I need is the user name. And the second thing I need is the email address. And with that set, I'm now able to do the commit. So I put the cursor back into the box, control and enter. This time commits without any doubts. And I have created my first commit. To show you that, I just call the git log command. And I do it one line. And typically I add here the command for a short status message. And here we are. You see in my Git there is just one commit, and that commit was just adding 28 files like expected, and a lot of more stuff around which came together with the Git project. And looking into my specific project, I can now start to show you how at the end such a new Angular project looks like. I'm switching back to the mode where I can see browser and Visual Studio Code on the screen together. I will now show you a little bit the structure around Angular, and then we will do our first steps changing code. So let's start here in code with the structure. As you easily can see, I'm in the identity management subfolder. This is my project I already created. And what you can see here is just Angular and all stuff around it. If you directly want to do something with the project itself, you have to step into the source folder. That is what we will have a look in a second. What you can see here as well are some files. All of them are important, of course, but there is one file which is a little bit more important, and this is the gitignore file. Gitignore is created out of the box together with the new project. And what happens there is that you can easily see that from that big folder, that means from the complete structure here in identity management, a lot of files and folders are just excluded. That is what gitignore says. And that's the reason why you get only 28 files for your last commit instead of 40,000 files, which are parts of some of these excluded folders there. The rest here is not very important. It is stuff that is necessary so that we can at the end start our web server later on, and it runs together with Git. We are now looking into the source folder, which is for the next parts of our lesson, the important folder. In the source folder, there is the starting point, that means the root of the website. And the root of the website is the index.html. And if I step into the index.html, then you can easily see not a lot of content in there. There is mainly something with a title that is called identity management. That is what I created before. And the main important part of this index.html is this part here. This is in the body a tag that says, here, please insert the app root. And the app root, this is something you can find a little bit down below. Therefore, you have to open in the source folder the app folder. And in the app folder, you find now the structure of our small Angular program. Let me say it that way. There are some files more important than the others. First of all, there is the app component .ts. TS stands for TypeScript. TypeScript is, of course, Java with type information. And you remember here the app root, which is part of my index.html. And if I step here into the app components TS, then you can easily see that app root exists here as a selector. And that means if I reference in my index.html a selector name as a tag, you saw that, AppRoot, then this will be automatically inserted into my project. And that's the reason why I get at the end this page here on the right hand side displayed, because the appcomponent.ts automatically is connected with the appcomponent.html, and the appcomponent.html is exactly the site you see here on the right hand side. What I like to do here for my first exercise is just to delete all of that stuff, and as you easily can see on the right hand side nothing happens. My app component HTML is of course empty and everything gets displayed on the right hand side. Maybe a refresh will help, but you will see nothing happens. And that means Herwig tells you only lies. This is not quite correct, of course, and the reason for is that this app component HTML is changed, of course, but the dot here says it is not saved. And with that, the program on the right-hand side can't recognize that. So I step back into my Visual Studio Code and press Save, Ctrl S, of course. And what happens? Suddenly the right-hand side turns empty. This is now exactly what is here in the Code Studio as well. And if I enter something like, for example, Hello World, and save that again, you see on the right-hand side Hello World. This is one of the powerful features in Angular. I change here some files, and with the save action, automatically my browser gets refreshed. That is called hot reload. You see that all the time if something is stored. And that means on the other hand side, if you don't see what you entered right now, then typically to save the file is something you forgot to do. However, we saw now that the app component HTML looks like connected to the app component.ts. And now we have two more files left we should talk about. One is, of course, the app component cascading style sheet, CSS. As you can see, no styles right now in there. This is to define your own styles. And there is another one that is called the app modules.ts. We will see that more often during the training. The modules.ts is the file where you add more and more Angular modules, and with that more and more Angular features you want to use later on. Right now, 2 features exist, or 3 features. There is the ng module, of course, the browser module that is necessary to display the stuff. And there is an app component module, which helps you to display then the app component. This is out of the box. We will extend that a little bit later. But for now, this is the structure you have to recognize. And now let's talk just about how to get content into that browser page on the right-hand side easily. You can see here our hello world, and because that is an HTML file, it is quite easy, for example, just to wrap a tag around. So if I just take hello world and enter it here into just an h1 tag, what will automatically happen? I will get a much bigger hello world on the right-hand side. But honestly, just to write my HTML here in that specific file, I don't need Angular, because that is something I can do just with a single text file, in difference to all the structure you can see here. So the interesting thing is how to show data objects just here in such an HTML file. And data objects are objects just generated and created here in the components TypeScript. These are all of my objects I want to handle. These are all the calculations I want to do. And later on, the content of and the result of this these calculations is something I want to show here in the HTML file. I told you app component HTML and app component.ts. They are connected files. They are pretty important. The one generates the data, the other one shows the data. However, what we can see right now, it's a component, and this component gets displayed, of course, and as you easily can see, there is the selector. We talked about it. This is what it's called from the upper side. But additionally to that exists here as well a so-named class app component, and in front of the class there is export, which says this can be used outside of this file as well, for example in the HTML. And there's one property in the class right now, and that one property is named title. And so I just take the title there. And of course, I move the title into my HTML. And doing so, and just pressing save, you can easily see here on the right-hand side the word title is written. So that is not a way just to display my data. Quite correct, this is text, and text gets displayed here. It's like hello world. And because of that exists in Angular something which is called the interpolation syntax, and that means I can write that very specific property named title into two Waveley brackets. And doing so, automatically the title turns into the value of the variable. That means title is my variable, and identity management is what you can see here, directly the element I want to show. And of course, if I now step into the components where that title is identified, then I'm able just to write here a proper title. For example, this here is my small identity management, and storing that automatically you can see here that very specific variable. And returning back to the app components here, I am able just to take the title and replace here, for example, my hello world, and that will then automatically display. And as you can see here, there is just my first error. You see that automatically the error says there is something not terminated. And if I look at that specific text, then I can see my h1 tag here is directly somehow connected with my title. And that at the end shows that I was a little bit lazy by copying and pasting, and I just dropped one of the brackets. So I have to ensure that the bracket is already available. Now it looks good. I can just delete the second title, press S again, and my small identity management, it's now displayed as a header. Wonderful. This is the way how the whole thing works. In the next step, it is now necessary to create some data we can use to play with.